Hello and welcome back to Compensation Uncovered, the series that lifts the lid on the world of personal injury claims. We're here to arm Australians with everything you need to know to make sure you get all the compensation you're fairly entitled to under the law. Compensation Uncovered is brought to you by our team here at Law Partners, and we are Australia's largest specialist personal injury firm. I'm your host, Piers Toomey, and it is a pleasure to be back here with you. So today I'm joined by two very senior expert lawyers, Chantel Curry and Katie Norman. How are you guys today?
Well, thank you, Piers.
Good, thanks, Piers. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for making time again. I do have a couple of questions I'd like to sort of look into the seriousness of a claim. So the first question I might start with you, Chantel, if that's okay. Looking at the idea of whole person impairment, or what I believe is called the WPI index, something to do with the sort of seriousness of the injury following the accident. Could you help our audience sort of understand a little bit about what that means and what is sort of below or above the whole person impairment index?
Yeah, sure. So regardless of whether you're at fault or not at fault in a car accident, you can be entitled to something else called whole person impairment compensation or permanent impairment compensation. Now, you have to be injured to an extent to receive it. So someone who might have a minor injury, for example, just a bit of whiplash that settles down, generally they won't be entitled to whole person impairment compensation. They need to reach a threshold of what's called 11%. So types of injuries that would kind of get you to that level of impairment would be things like, a back injury that requires surgery. And that seems pretty serious, but you can also combine a psychological injury with a physical injury. So some people might have a sore back coupled with a bit of anxiety after the car accident, and that would generally get them to the 11% threshold to receive that type of compensation.
Right. Okay. So it's a sort of the level of it's sort of worked out on a sort of mathematical basis and how impaired you are indeed. And is that kind of compensation sort of like a weekly payments thing, or is that a lump sum kind of a payment?
It's a lump sum, so it's a one-off compensation basically for the level of impairment. So unlike, wage payments or medical treatment that you might need as you go, this one is one assessment, one lump sum, once you've kind of had all your treatment and this is as good as you're going to be.
I see. So if you don't qualify for that 11%, you still might be getting some payments, as you said, for medical treatment or weekly benefits, but just not that. And so in your practice, Katie, do you find that your clients are very often or not very often reaching this whole person impairment level index of 11%?
I think it's really common. I think the unique thing about the transport accident scheme is you can combine both your physical injuries as well as your primary psychiatric injuries. So if you're left with permanent injuries, it's very likely that you recover an impairment benefit.
Yeah, that's very good. It's very uncommon in all of Australia in terms of being able to combine your physical and your psychological injury together to reach a particular threshold.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
It's quite unique to the state of Victoria then.
And to TAC.
So further, we're talking about the seriousness of an injury. So in the TAC context, what's the difference between a common law component of the claim or a claim without a common law component?
So a common law claim is a claim you can pursue if you've got a serious injury and it was caused by someone else's negligence, and it encompasses damages for your pain and suffering and also potentially your loss of earnings. And it's in addition to your other benefits that you could access, including your impairment benefit, your medical and like expenses, and your loss of earnings payments.
Yeah, whereas a non-common law claim relates to if you were in an at-fault accident, you were at fault, you'd still continue to receive your wage payments and your treatment, like we discussed earlier, and possibly permanent impairment compensation, but you just don't have the opportunity to bring a much larger lump sum, as Katie was saying, in relation to the pain and suffering and loss in income. So in that circumstance for a common law claim, a lot of people think that you have to be completely off work to receive a lump sum, but you don't. So your pain and suffering itself, for example, if you've had surgery, can get you there.
Right. Okay. And just so I understand for sure, you have to be not at fault for common law to be applied for you, right? It needs to be someone else was at fault or negligent, as you said.
That's exactly right. Someone else has to have caused the accident.
I see. And I'm sure our audience would love to know, I think you indicated it there, but there are circumstances in which you could be eligible for all these different type of entitlements at the same time. Is that right? Common law, whole person impairment index, and the other weekly benefits and medical treatments. Is that to do with the seriousness of the accident and your condition?
It's both the seriousness of the accident as well as the circumstances of the accident.
Mm.
And on the point of fault, if it was a case where you were partially at fault but the other driver was also partially at fault, you can still pursue a common law claim.
Is that right?
It doesn't have to be 100% the fault of the other person.
Okay, and I imagine it helps to have some expert legal advice as to what your options are before you pursue this by yourself, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's a very common scenario when you're involved in a car accident, both drivers pointing the finger at each other. So seeking legal advice in that regard and negotiating a settlement, even though both may be partially at fault, you can still receive some compensation.
So I'm sure a lot of our audience would like to know about the range of payouts when it comes to these kind of accident compensation claims. I know it's not always one size fits all, but what is a typical range for a payout in Victoria?
I think it's a really difficult question because it really does depend on each unique client's circumstances and how the particular injuries impacted them. And that's why it's really important, and something we focus on here in Law Partners, is getting to know our clients personally and getting to know their story. It's often what clients don't tell you that becomes the most important thing in their case and allows us to increase their compensation. So I think making sure that our clients trust us so they will tell us everything we need to know. For a common law damages claim, that's the much larger claim, and those are six-figure claims generally, but they can go up to seven-figure claims. That's more reserved for people who have serious spinal injuries, brain injuries, are very young when they're injured, or they've got amputations or paralysis.
And what might be a typical range that we would see in sort of common law claim versus a WPI, whole person impairment?
There's a great disparity between the two, and that's because impairment doesn't take into account your pain and suffering or your loss of earnings. It's solely on how you rate under the WPI. So those claims start at the $9,000 mark, and they can go up into the six figures, but most people don't get that high, whereas the common law takes into account the impact of your injuries on your day-to-day life. So those claims do sort of start at the six-figure mark and they go all the way up to around $2.2 million or just under.
Wow, that could be really quite considerable, isn't it, in certain circumstances? Has that been your experience as well, Chantel, in terms of that range of...
Yeah, absolutely, Piers. So in terms of the common law side of things, because it does take into account loss in income and the ability for someone to earn money for the rest of their working life, you do get into those higher numbers. But for the permanent impairment claim, as Katie was saying, the figures could be anywhere from 9,000 to up to 400,000, depending on the whole person impairment percentage that they end up with. So at Law Partners, and unlike other firms, we actually do get to know our clients a lot better. So say, for example, someone walks into your office and they've been in a car accident and they've injured their right shoulder. We would not stop and only assess their right shoulder. We would, over time, ask them, how else has this injury affected your life? So a lot of people would develop injury to their left shoulder purely because they're overusing it. Exactly right. So they start to vacuum, they brush their teeth, all with their left side. And that slowly over time creates a new injury. So the two combined get you a higher percentage to get a higher compensation payout. Other things I've seen is people take a lot of medication, pain medication, and that affects their gastrointestinal system. So another one that we need to look into to determine whether there is any impairment there. Again, higher WPI. Same as a sleep disorder. They do develop, they get overweight, they can't sleep, they're in pain. Sleep disorders also increase the level of WPI. So getting to know our clients intimately, asking them very frequently, what are you feeling? And them, as Katie was saying, having the trust to come back and tell us exactly what's going on will help us maximise their entitlements.
Thanks so much for tuning into Compensation Uncovered, brought to you by our team here at Law Partners. If you found this episode useful, be sure to follow us on social media, where we'll be dropping a lot more content very soon as we have many more stories and legal insights to share with you. Until then, goodbye for now.